For 2 straight years, my daughter Katie told me her husband Finn was the most abusive man she'd ever met. Every phone call and every visit brought new stories of his cruelty, how he controlled her money, screamed at their children, and made her flinch when he moved too quickly. I spent months secretly planning her escape, eventually finding the perfect house just 20 minutes from mine. With 3 bedrooms and a good school district, it promised a fresh start for her and my grandchildren. The day I texted her, "I bought you a house. Tour tomorrow at 3 p.m." She replied with 17 heart emojis and called me, crying what I thought were happy tears. That night I lay awake, imagining the moment I would finally hand her the keys to freedom from her monstrous husband. Then at 11 p.m. my phone rang. Finn's name flashed on the screen and my blood ran cold. I almost didn't answer, but his voicemail sounded broken and desperate, so I called back. "Sir," he said, "I need to show you something before tomorrow. Please, I know you hate me, but this is about Katie." I told him to go to hell, but just as I was about to hang up, he said something that stopped me cold. "I have security footage from our house. You need to see who she really is." 20 minutes later, I was staring at my laptop watching Ring camera footage from their living room. Katie was screaming at Finn while he stood backed into a corner, shielding their youngest child with his body. A lamp flew from Katie's hand and shattered against the wall inches from the baby's head. Finn never raised a hand or yelled back. He just kept pleading, "Please, Katie, not in front of the kids." My stomach twisted. There were dozens of videos, Katie attacking him with her fists, Katie threatening to tell everyone he beat her if he didn't give her money, Katie laughing on the phone to someone, saying, "He's such a pushover he won't even defend himself." Finn's voice cracked through the phone. "I never touched her, never. I just wanted you to know the truth before you reward her lies." But that wasn't the worst of it. Finn also sent screenshots from her phone, proof of multiple affairs over the past year, explicit messages, and plans to meet other men while telling Finn she was at her sister's. One name, Derek, appeared again and again. I sat there for an hour trying to process that my daughter, the woman I was about to give a house to, was the real abuser. She had made me hate an innocent man who was only trying to protect his children. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would. I tracked down Derek on social media. It wasn't hard. Katie had tagged him in old posts before blocking me from her profile. I called from a number he wouldn't recognize. "Hey, is this Derek? I need to ask you about Katie Fret." A long pause. "Who is this?" "Her father. Did you know she was married?" The silence stretched so thin I thought he'd hung up. Then quietly he said, "What? No. She told me she was a single mom escaping her abusive ex-husband. She said he was dangerous, that she was terrified of him." My heart sank even further. "Derek, she's been married to Finn this whole time. He's not her ex and he's not abusive. She made it all up." I heard him sit down hard. His voice was strangled. "I've been picking her kids up from school, taking them to the park. They call me Uncle Derek. I thought I was helping save them from their dangerous dad." The poor man sounded sick, and then an idea began to form, one that would change everything. "Derek," I said, "how would you feel about being at the house tomorrow when I show it to her, with Finn there too? You want us both there? I think Katie needs to face both of you at once. No escape routes, no lies." We spent an hour planning it. Derek would arrive early and wait in the living room. Finn would be in the kitchen. I would walk Katie through the house, saving those rooms for last. The next afternoon, Katie pulled up right at 3, practically bouncing out of her car. She hugged me tight, tears already shining in her eyes. "Dad, you saved my life. I can finally escape. The kids are going to be so happy here." I let her inside, allowing her to gush over each room, imagining her children sleeping peacefully in their new bedrooms. When we reached the living room, she stopped mid-sentence. Derek was sitting on the couch, his laptop open. Katie's face went white. "What is he doing here?" Before Derek could answer, Finn walked out from the kitchen. Katie stumbled backward, grabbing the wall for support. "No, no, you can't both be here. Dad, what is this?" Derek spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. "You told me you were divorced. You told me Finn was dangerous. You made me think I was protecting those kids from a monster." Finn just stood there, looking at her with an exhaustion that was painful to witness. 2 years, Katie. 2 years of being hit, threatened, and isolated from my own children while you told everyone I was the abuser." Katie started spinning, her eyes darting for an exit, but I blocked the doorway. Her tears came fast now, but for the first time I could see they weren't real. "Daddy, please," she begged. "It's not what it looks like." I pulled the house deed from my jacket pocket. She reached for it desperately. "Thank you, thank you." "The house isn't in your name, Katie," I said. She froze. "What?" "It's in Finn's name, for him and the kids after the divorce." In a flash, she lunged into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. But Derek moved faster than I thought possible, crossing the room and seizing her wrist before she could swing the blade at anyone. He twisted hard, and she screamed, a raw sound of pure rage and pain, as the knife clattered to the tile floor. Finn immediately stepped in front of both children, shielding them with his whole body. while I kicked the knife hard, sending it skittering across the hardwood until it hit the far wall. Katie dropped to her knees, sobbing. But these tears were different from every manipulative performance I'd witnessed over the past 2 years. They were the tears of someone whose entire fabricated world had just shattered in front of everyone. Her face crumpled in a way I'd never seen before, raw, desperate, and terrifyingly real. Derek kept a firm grip on her arm as she shook and cried on the floor. The children were pressed against Finn's legs, the little girl hiding her face while the boy stared at his mother with wide, scared eyes. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped my phone, pulling it from my pocket. But somehow my voice was steady when the operator answered. I reported that my daughter had threatened people with a weapon, gave them the address, and confirmed everyone was currently safe. Before I even hung up, Katie's sobs turned into screams. She yelled that we had all planned this together, that we had ambushed her, that she was the real victim and we were all liars. Her voice grew louder and more frantic with each accusation, spittle flying from her mouth as she thrashed against Derek's grip. He held firm while Finn crouched down with both children, whispering something I couldn't hear over the screaming. The boy had started crying now, too, quiet tears tracing paths down his cheeks as his father rubbed his back. The police arrived in 6 minutes, though it felt like an hour. 2 officers came through the unlocked front door. The older one, Officer Hoffman, took control with calm authority. The moment Katie saw the uniform, her screaming cut off as if a switch had been flipped. Fresh tears welled in her eyes, and her voice shook as she told Hoffman that these men had attacked her in her own house, and she had only grabbed the knife to defend herself. I watched her perform, recognizing every gesture and tone from 2 years of believing her lies, the trembling lip, the wide, scared eyes, the expertly broken voice. She was so convincing that I saw the younger officer's expression soften with sympathy. But Hoffman's face remained neutral and professional as he asked her to step aside with his partner. Finn moved quietly to Officer Hoffman, pulling out his phone with slightly shaking hands. Explained that he had brought security footage specifically in case Katie became violent, and that he had months of evidence documenting her behavior. The officer took the phone and began to watch. I saw his face change as he scrolled through the videos. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. He watched clip after clip of Katie throwing things, screaming and hitting Finn while he protected the children. His professional mask cracked slightly, shifting from neutral to grim understanding. Katie saw him watching and her protests grew louder and more frantic. She demanded to know what lies Finn was showing him, insisting the videos were fake, edited, or taken out of context. She was truly panicking now because her usual manipulation wasn't working on this officer who was seeing undeniable proof of who she really was. Officer Hoffman asked if anyone was hurt. Derek held up his left arm, showing a thin, bleeding cut where the knife had grazed him during her initial swing. The officer called for a paramedic and then took statements from each of us separately. Derek explained how he disarmed her. I described what I had witnessed and the reason for our gathering. Finn gave his statement while holding both children, his voice quiet but steady as he detailed the years of abuse. When Officer Hoffman approached Katie, she instantly demanded a lawyer and refused to say another word, the smartest choice she'd made all day. Her face had gone cold and calculating, the tears drying up as she realized she needed to protect herself legally. After the paramedic cleaned and bandaged Derek's shallow cut, Officer Hoffman looked at Finn and asked him directly if he wanted to press charges for domestic violence, explaining that the documented pattern of abuse combined the knife incident made a strong case. Finn looked down at his children, the boy clinging to his shirt, the girl with her thumb in her mouth. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing his love for them against years of fear and pain. Finally he said, "Yes," so quietly I barely heard him. "I want them safe from their mother's violence." His voice cracked on the last word as he pulled his children closer. Katie started screaming again when Hoffman told her she was under arrest, fighting the handcuffs as his partner put them on. She yelled that I was supposed to be on her side, that I was her father. "How could you let them do this to me?" I made myself look directly into her eyes, even though it hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. "I love you," I told her, "but I can't protect you from the consequences of your own choices anymore." Her face twisted with rage and she spat at me, the spittle hitting my shirt before the officers pulled her toward the door. I stood there, watching them lead my daughter away, her screams fading as they put her in the patrol car. This might be the last time I saw her as a free person, and that thought made my chest feel hollow and heavy at the same time. The little girl started crying harder when her mom left. Finn picked her up, bouncing her gently and making soothing sounds. After the patrol car pulled away, he just collapsed onto the couch with both children wrapped tightly in his arms. All 3 of them shook as if they'd been holding everything in and could finally let go, the trauma releasing now that the immediate danger had passed. I sat down heavily in a chair across from them, suddenly feeling every one of my 62 years. Derek stood by the window, looking out at the empty street, his bandaged arm hanging at his side. Nobody spoke for several minutes. The house felt too quiet after all the chaos, as if the walls themselves were processing what had just happened. I broke the silence first, apologizing to Finn for the 2 years I spent believing Katie's lies and, without knowing it, supporting her abuse of him. The words felt completely inadequate for the harm I'd caused. Finn shook his head, still holding his kids. Katie was incredibly convincing, he said. I doubted my own reality many times before I started recording evidence just to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. His forgiveness somehow made me feel worse instead of better. He shouldn't have had to comfort me, the father of the woman who terrorized him for years. The boy looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I tried to smile reassuringly, but I'm not sure it worked. Derek finally spoke from his spot by the window, his voice hollow and distant. He asked how long Katie had actually been married and living with Finn, as if he needed to understand the full scope of the lies. Finn explained they'd been married for 8 years and living together the entire time. Katie would meet Derek during school hours when the kids were in class, or tell Finn she was visiting her sister for the evening. Eric sat down hard on the arm of the couch and put his head in his hands. I watched him process the truth, that he'd been helping her cheat while she painted her husband as a monster, that he'd been picking up kids from school thinking he was their protector, when in reality he was enabling their mother's abuse. The weight of being manipulated settled over all three of us in different ways, each realizing how thoroughly Katie had controlled our understanding of reality. The boy peeked around Finn's leg. He looked about 7, with Finn's dark hair and Katie's green eyes. He studied my face for a long moment before speaking in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. Are you the grandpa Mommy always talks about? Something cracked open in my chest. I knelt down to his level, making myself small and non-threatening. Yes, I'm your grandfather. I'm so sorry I didn't know about you and your sister until today. His lower lip trembled. Are you going to hurt my daddy like Mommy does? The question hit me harder than anything else that day. This child had watched his mother abuse his father for so long that he expected all adults to be violent. I reached out slowly, letting him see my empty, open hands. No, buddy, I would never hurt your dad. I was wrong about what was happening in your family. I want to help keep all of you safe now. The little girl, who couldn't have been more than 3, peeked out from behind Finn. She had blonde curls and wore a pink shirt with a cartoon character on it. Is the yelling over? Her tiny voice asked, making my throat tight. Finn gathered both kids closer and kissed the top of the girl's head. Yes, sweetheart, the yelling is over, and guess what? Grandpa is going to help us move our things into this house. This is our new home now. The boy looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. We get to live here without Mommy. Finn's face showed a mixture of profound pain and rel. For now, yes, just us. Derek stood up, looking completely lost, as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. I should go. I need to process all this. He walked toward the door without looking at any of us. I followed him out to make sure he was okay to drive. He sat in his car for a minute with his head on the steering wheel before starting the engine and pulling away. When I came back inside, Finn was explaining to the kids that they needed to get their clothes and toys from the old house. The boy asked if Mommy would be there. Finn promised him she wouldn't. Over the next 2 hours, Finn and I made 6 trips between the houses. We worked mostly in silence, both trying to wrap our heads around everything. The old house felt wrong, haunted by the bad things that had happened there. I could see marks on the walls where objects had been thrown and a dent in the kitchen cabinet at exactly fist height. While we were loading the 3rd trip, an older neighbor woman with gray hair and a bun came out. She looked at Finn and then at me. Is Katie really gone? The police took her away. Finn nodded. The woman's face showed pure relief. Thank God, I've been telling him for months I'd testify if he ever reported her. I saw her hit him through my kitchen window more times than I can count. She turned to me. You must be Katie's father. I'm glad you finally know the truth. I was too overwhelmed to find any words. She just patted Finn's arm gently and went back inside. As we loaded the last boxes, Finn stopped and turned to me. His voice was quiet and thick with emotion. Thank you for believing me, for putting the house in my name. I was terrified you'd dismiss me like everyone else does. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Nobody takes it seriously when a man says his wife beats him. I'd accepted I might never escape. I was just trying to keep the kids safe until they were old enough to tell someone themselves. Shame burned through my whole body. I'm sorry it took video evidence for me to see the truth. I should have questioned her stories. I should have talked to you directly years ago. Finn shook his head. Katie is incredibly convincing. Don't beat yourself up. I doubted my own reality sometimes before I started recording everything. We drove back to the new house in silence. I helped Finn set up the kids' beds and unpack the basics they would need for the night. The boy, whose name I learned was Michael, wanted his nightlight plugged in next to his bed. The little girl, Sophie, insisted her stuffed rabbit had to sleep on her pillow. By the time everything was set up enough for them to sleep, it was almost 8 p.m. I hugged both kids goodbye and promised I'd come back soon. Finn walked me to my truck. Thank you for everything. I drove home in a fog, my brain struggling to process the new reality. My daughter was in jail, my son-in-law was the victim, and I had grandchildren I never knew existed. The house I bought to save Katie had instead saved Finn and the kids. When I pulled into my driveway, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from my ex-wife, Katie's mother. We'd been divorced for 15 years but stayed in contact because of Katie. She must have heard about the arrest. I wasn't ready to talk to her. I knew she would demand I bail Katie out and make excuses for her behavior, something I could no longer do. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before going inside. The silence in my own house felt heavy and empty. I made coffee just to have something to do with my hands. Around midnight, unable to bear the quiet any longer, I called my brother, Ross. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. "Do you know what time it is?" I told him everything. The 2 years of lies, the security footage, Derek, the confrontation, the knife, Katie's arrest, the kids. It all poured out of me in one long, unbroken stream. Ross didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said, "I'm coming over tomorrow. You shouldn't be alone right now." I thanked him and hung up. I didn't sleep at all that night. Next morning, Ross showed up at 9 with his wife, Juliet, who was a family therapist. She immediately understood what I was going through. As we sat at my kitchen table, she explained that Katie likely had a serious personality disorder, describing people who see themselves as victims even when they are hurting others. I kept saying I should have seen the signs. Juliet put her hand on mine and told me firmly that skilled manipulators fool everyone, even trained professionals get taken in. "You were a victim too," she said. That thought had never occurred to me. My phone rang while we were talking. It was my ex-wife. I almost didn't answer, but Juliet nodded at me encouragingly. I picked up and my ex-wife started screaming before I could say hello. "How could you abandon our daughter? How could you side with that manipulative husband?" I tried to explain about the evidence, but she wouldn't listen. She insisted Finn must have faked everything and that I was a fool for believing him. She demanded I bail Katie out immediately. "I won't enable Katie's abuse anymore," I told her. "You can do it if you want, but I won't." She called me heartless and hung up. Juliet squeezed my shoulder. Ross made more coffee. That afternoon, my ex-wife bailaid Katie out. I knew she would. Within an hour, my phone rang with Katie's number. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to hear what she would say. She was crying, begging me to understand her side, saying everyone was lying about her. I told her I had seen the footage and the screenshots. I knew the truth now, and she needed serious professional help. Her crying stopped instantly. Her voice turned cold and hard. She screamed that I was dead to her, that she'd make sure I never saw my grandchildren again, and that she'd tell everyone what a terrible father I was. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. That was my daughter, the little girl I had raised. Somewhere along the way, she had become someone I didn't recognize. I called Finn to warn him that Katie was out on bail and might try to come to the house. He thanked me, but said he had already filed for an emergency restraining order and temporary custody. His lawyer had been preparing for this possibility for months. I told him I would support him however he needed. "That means everything to me and the kids," he said. 2 days after Katie's arrest, Detective Lou Bertrand called asking for my full statement. I drove to the police station that afternoon and sat across from him in a small, gray-walled interview room. He had a recording device and a notepad. I talked for 3 hours, recounting every lie Katie had told me, each story now cast in a new, horrifying light by the footage I had seen. I described how she claimed Finn threw things when she was the one hurling lamps, how she said he screamed at the kids when the video showed him speaking quietly while she raged, how she accused him of controlling the money when bank records proved she was draining the accounts for her affairs. Detective Bertrand took detailed notes. He explained they were building a domestic violence case against Katie, and my testimony about her 2-year deception campaign would help establish her pattern of manipulation and willingness to destroy an innocent person's reputation. I felt sick revisiting each lie, realizing how completely I had believed them. The detective's expression remained professional, but he mentioned that false allegations of abuse were more common than people realized, and that they destroyed lives. Before I left, he shared something else. 2 of Finn's former coworkers had come forward with statements about witnessing Katie's public verbal abuse. She would show up at his workplace, berate him in front of customers, and call him worthless. But the moment anyone tried to intervene, she would instantly switch, tears flowing as she played the victim, claiming Finn was controlling, and she was just trying to get money for groceries. The coworkers said they believed her at first, but after multiple incidents, they saw the pattern. How Finn never fought back, how he looked exhausted and defeated. One coworker said Finn had even shown her bruises, but begged her not to report it because Katie threatened to claim he was the abuser. I drove home in a fog, feeling physically ill. All those supportive texts I'd sent Katie, all the times I'd offered to help her escape. I had been encouraging her to torment an innocent, trapped man. An hour later, Finn called, his voice nervous but hopeful. He asked if I would be willing to attend his emergency custody hearing as a witness. He explained that having Katie's own father testify about her deception and violence would be powerful evidence for the judge. I agreed immediately. It's the least I can do after enabling her abuse for 2 years, I told him. I could hear the relief in his voice. He said his lawyer believed they had a strong case for sole custody with only supervised visitation, given the security footage, the knife incident, and the growing number of witness statements. The custody hearing happened 3 days later in family court. I arrived early with Ross for support. When we entered the courtroom, I saw Katie sitting with her lawyer. She looked smaller. When she saw me walk in and sit on Finn's side, her face cycled through surprise, then hurt, then something cold and hard. The judge was an older man with gray hair and reading glasses. Katie's lawyer presented her as a struggling mother who made one mistake in a moment of fear, arguing the security footage was taken out of context. Then Katie took the stand. I watched her perform for the judge with tears and a trembling voice, claiming Finn had manipulated me, that the footage was edited, and that she only grabbed the knife because she was corner. Ed and terrified by 3 men. And Finn's lawyer called me to the stand. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I spoke about the 2 years of lies, the security footage that revealed the real abuser, the knife incident, and Katie's masterful manipulation. I detailed the affairs and the threats Finn had endured. Katie's face showed shock, then betrayal, and finally settled into a mask of cold hatred, her eyes locked on mine with pure rage. I kept talking and didn't look away. The judge asked to review the security footage in his chambers. We waited for 30 minutes in a tense silence. When he returned, his expression was grim. He granted Finn temporary sole custody, allowing Katie only supervised visitation at a family center. He extended the restraining order to include the children's school and activities. Katie's face went white, then red. She started shaking, then jumped up from her chair and began screaming. She yelled that we would all regret this, that she would prove Finn was the real abuser, and that I was the worst father in the world for abandoning my own daughter. Security guards moved toward her as her lawyer tried to calm her down. The judge banged his gavel, warning her that another outburst would result in contempt charges. I sat there, feeling completely hollowed out. My daughter had just called me the worst father in the world in open court. Part of me wanted to run after her, but the bigger part knew there was nothing I could say. I was grieving the daughter I thought I had while being forced to accept the painful reality of who she was. Ross put a hand on my shoulder from behind me. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. I nodded, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Over the next week, I started meeting with Juliet for therapy sessions. In her comfortable office with soft lighting, she helped me understand that I too was a victim of Katie's manipulation. She explained that my parental love made me vulnerable, as I naturally wanted to protect my child. People with personality disorders like Katie's, she said, are incredibly skilled at finding and exploiting those emotional vulnerabilities. I kept returning to my guilt, saying I should have known, should have questioned her stories, should have protected the kids sooner. Juliet gently but firmly told me that beating myself up wouldn't change the past. The important thing was that I saw the truth now and was taking action to support the actual victims. She said the grief I was feeling was real and valid. I was mourning the loss of the daughter I thought I had. Processing that contradiction would take time. Some sessions I cried, others I just sat in numb silence. But slowly, I began to accept that loving Katie and holding her accountable for her actions were not mutually exclusive. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from Finn. He asked if I'd like to come meet the kids properly now that things had calmed down. I stared at the message for a long time before responding, yes. The drive to the house felt longer than it was. I was nervous, wondering if Michael and Sophie would even want to see me after the terrifying confrontation they had witnessed. Finn answered the door with a tired but genuine smile. The house looked different now, lived in, safe, with toys scattered around. Michael appeared from the hallway and stopped when he saw me. I knelt down to his level and said hello. He stayed near his father, quiet at first. Then Sophie came running, her blonde curls bouncing. She grabbed Finn's leg and peeked at me with curious eyes. Finn introduced me as their grandpa and his friend who helped them move in. Sophie's face lit up and she asked if I wanted to see her new room. Michael stayed quiet but nodded when Finn asked if that was okay. I spent the afternoon playing with them while Finn made dinner. Sophie showed me every toy and insisted I sit through a tea party with her stuffed animals. Michael eventually warmed up and showed me his book collection, proud that he was reading above his grade level. The house felt peaceful, free of the tension that must have plagued their old home. As the afternoon wore on, Michael grew more comfortable and his questions began. He wanted to know if I lived nearby and if I'd come back to visit. I promised I would. Then he got quiet before asking the question I knew was coming. "Do you know my mom was mean to my dad?" I sat on his bed next to him. "I didn't know," I told him honestly. "Your mom lied to me too. I thought your dad was the mean one, but I was wrong." Michael nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. "She lies a lot," he said matter-of-factly. "She told us Daddy was bad, but Daddy never hurt us. Only Mommy hurt Daddy." The simple, devastating truth in his statement broke something fresh inside my chest. This 7-year-old had lived with the reality of his mother's abuse his entire life, while I had believed her lies from a distance. During dinner with the kids watching a movie in the next room, Finn opened up about the years of abuse in a way he hadn't before. He explained how Katie would threaten to claim he hit her if he ever tried to leave or tell anyone the truth. She'd say no one would believe a man, he told me, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly. She said she'd make sure I never saw my kids again. I stayed because I was terrified she'd get custody and hurt them without me there to intervene, so I endured it. I documented everything secretly and waited for any chance to escape safely with my children. He looked at me, the weight of those years clear in his eyes. When you called me that night before the house tour, I saw my opportunity. I knew if I could show you the truth, maybe you'd help me instead of helping her trap me further. I listened with growing horror as he described being a hostage in his own home, his love for his children used as a weapon against him. Telling you this, Finn said, feels like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. I told him I was sorry for every supportive text I'd sent Katie, for not seeing the truth sooner. Said he understood why I believed her. But now, he added, his focus clear, we can move forward. We can focus on keeping the kids safe and happy. That's what matters most. A few days later, Finn called me, his voice laced with worry. The court-ordered supervised visitations were starting the following week. Katie would see Michael and Sophie every Saturday at a family center with a trained supervisor present. While Finn was relieved the visits were supervised, he dreaded the brief contact with Katie in the parking lot, fearing she would cause a scene or say something manipulative in front of the children. I offered immediately to handle all the driving, picking the kids up from his house, taking them to the visits, and bringing them back afterwards so Finn wouldn't have to see Katie at all. The relief in his voice was immediate and profound. We agreed I would arrive at his house by 9:00 on Saturday mornings for their 10:00 appointment. That same evening, my ex-wife called. This time, instead of screaming, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. She begged me to help get Katie's custody back, insisting our daughter was just going through a hard time and that taking her children away was cruel. I took a deep breath and explained as gently as I could that Katie wasn't just struggling, she was dangerous. I told her the security footage didn't lie and that enabling Katie's behavior by pretending it wasn't serious wouldn't help anyone, especially not Katie herself. Her crying quickly turned to anger. You've turned your back on your own daughter for a man you barely know, she spat before hanging up. I sat there, knowing that conversation had likely damaged our relationship beyond repair. She had chosen to believe Katie's lies over the documented evidence. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. I showed up at Finn's at 9 sharp. The kids were dressed and waiting, Michael looking anxious and Sophie merely confused. Finn gave them both long, tight hugs and reminded them to be good before walking them to my car. The drive to the family center was quiet, with Michael staying silent the whole way and Sophie chattering nervously about her toys. The building was plain and institutional, with a worn waiting room and children's drawings taped to the walls. A woman with a clipboard checked us in, explained she would be supervising, and then led Michael and Sophie through a door into a room where Katie was already waiting. I caught a fleeting glimpse of Katie's face lighting up before the door closed. I sat in the waiting room for the next hour, trying to read a magazine but mostly just watching the clock tick by. When the door finally opened, the supervisor emerged first, her expression tight. Sophie was crying, and Michael looked completely shut down, his eyes blank and distant. Katie tried to follow them out, but the supervisor firmly instructed her to wait inside while the children left. I got both kids to the car quickly and buckled them in, noticing the slight tremble in Michael's hands. The drive back was silent except for Sophie's sniffles. About halfway home, Michael spoke in a small, fragile voice. Do we have to keep seeing Mommy? The question broke my heart. I kept my own voice steady. The judge says yes for now, buddy, but your daddy and I are keeping you safe and the supervisor is there to make sure Mommy behaves. Michael nodded but didn't look convinced. I made a mental note to tell Finn how rough the visit had been on them. 2 days later, Detective Bertrand called with an update. The district attorney had reviewed all the evidence, the footage, the screenshots, the witness statements, the knife incident, and decided to move forward with formal domestic violence charges against Katie. The case was strong. The DA was offering a plea deal, mandatory anger management, a full psychological evaluation, and probation instead of jail time if she pleaded guilty to reduce charges. I asked what would happen if she refused. We go to trial, he said. That means all of you testifying and possibly the kids being interviewed by Child Protective Services. The DA is confident, but a trial is harder on everyone. I thanked him and said I hoped she would take the deal, though I had a sinking feeling she wouldn't. Sure enough, Finn called me the next afternoon, his voice strained. Katie had rejected the plea deal. She was insisting on her innocence, claiming we had all conspired against her and the evidence was fake. Her lawyer had strongly advised her to take the deal, explaining the risks of a trial, but Katie had fired him on the spot for not believing in her. She had already hired a new lawyer who promised to fight the charges and prove Finn had manipulated everyone. Finn's lawyer warned him this meant we were heading for a full trial, where we would all have to testify under oath, and CPS would likely want to interview Michael and Sophie. "The truth is on our side," I told him, hearing the stress in his voice. "We'll get through it together." The following Tuesday, a woman named Aita from Child Protective Services arrived at Finn's house to conduct a home evaluation and interview the children. I had come over to support Finn, and I was glad I did. He looked visibly nervous when he opened the door for her. Anna was professional yet kind. She explained she needed to assess the home environment and speak with Michael and Sophie as part of the ongoing custody case. She walked through the entire house slowly, taking notes on her tablet about the clean conditions, the children's well-stocked bedrooms, the full refrigerator, and the safety measures like outlet covers and cabinet locks. She asked Finn detailed questions about his daily routine with the kids, their school arrangements, their health care, and his approach to discipline. Finn answered everything calmly and honestly, and I could see Anna's expression softening as she recognized the stable, loving home he provided. And she sat on the living room floor with Michael and Sophie, spending nearly an hour playing with them and asking gentle questions about their favorite foods, what they liked to do with Daddy, and if they felt safe at home. She carefully worded questions about their memories of living with both parents. Michael was cautious at first but gradually opened up, while Sophie mostly wanted to show off her stuffed animals. The most telling part was how both children became quiet and tense whenever Anna gently steered the conversation toward their mother. After the kids went to play in the backyard, Anna turned to me and asked for my perspective as Katie's father and the children's grandfather. I took a deep breath and told her everything: the 2 years of lies, the security footage, the confrontation, and my commitment to supporting Finn and the kids. I admitted I had been completely fooled and felt immense guilt for enabling the abuse, but that I now understood the situation clearly and was determined to help keep the children safe. Anna took detailed notes and then said something that surprised me. She explained that having the maternal grandfather actively supporting the father's custody was highly unusual and significant. "In most cases," she said, "family members side with their blood relative regardless of evidence. The fact that you changed your position after seeing proof speaks volumes about the seriousness of Katie's behavior, and that will be noted in my report to the court." That weekend, Ross invited Finn and the kids over for Sunday dinner at his and Juliet's house, wanting to show family support and help the children feel connected to my side of the family. Finn accepted gratefully. Ross and Juliet's house was warm and welcoming, clearly prepared for the kids with games and activities. Watching my brother and his wife greet Finn with genuine kindness and respect made my throat tight. This was what family should have been doing all along. Ross shook Finn's hand firmly and said he was glad to finally meet him properly. Juliet gave him a warm hug. Michael was shy at first, but Ross soon had him talking about soccer and kicking a ball around in the backyard. Sophie attached herself to Juliet, following her around the kitchen and helping stir the dinner ingredients. Over the meal, Ross and Juliet asked Finn about his work and his interests, treating him like a valued family member rather than the monster Katie had painted him as. They engaged the kids about school and played games with them after dinner. By the end of the evening, Sophie had fallen asleep on Ross's lap while he read her a story, and Michael was showing Juliet his drawings. Driving home, Finn thanked me quietly for having family who welcomed him and the kids so completely. "This is Joe. Since the beginning of building the family support system you should have always had," I told him. 3 weeks later, as I was getting ready for bed around 11 p.m., I heard a car door slam outside. I looked out the window to see Katie stumbling up my front walk, clearly drunk. My heart raced as she began pounding on my front door, crying and screaming my name. I didn't open the door, standing behind it instead and asking what she wanted. Through the wood, I could hear her sobbing that she needed my help to get her kids back, that she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt anyone. She claimed Finn had provoked her, and that if I would just help her one more time, everything would be fine. Her words were slurred and desperate. I told her through the locked door that I loved her, but I couldn't help her. I said she needed to accept responsibility and get professional help. The crying stopped instantly, replaced by screaming. She yelled that I had chosen Finn over my own daughter, that I was a terrible father, that she would never forgive me. She kept pounding on the door, and I could hear my neighbor's lights turning on. I told her she was violating the restraining order and needed to leave. She just screamed louder that she didn't care. Pulled out my phone and called 911, reporting a restraining order violation. Katie must have heard me because her screaming intensified. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car pulled up and Officer Hoffman got out. He approached Katie carefully as she sat crying on my front step. He spoke to her calmly, and she didn't resist as he helped her up and explained she was under arrest. She went completely limp, letting him guide her to the patrol car without a fight. Came to my door for my statement. As I spoke, I watched Katie through the patrol car window and felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. The daughter I'd raised would not have become this person. I was no longer sure the Katie I remembered had ever truly existed, or if I had been blind to who she was all along. The next morning at 7 a.m., Finn called. His voice was worried and tired as he asked if I was okay after the previous night. I told him I was managing, but felt strange that he was checking on me when Katie was his abuser. "We're family now," he said simply. "We need to support each other. Katie hurt both of us in different ways." The call was brief, but it shifted something in how I saw him. He wasn't just my son-in-law. He was someone who cared about me despite everything my daughter had put him through. 2 hours later, my ex-wife called, crying so hard she was barely intelligible. Katie was back in jail. Violating the restraining order had gotten her bail revoked, and the new bail was set at $50,000, an amount my ex-wife couldn't afford. She begged me to help pay it. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling torn in half. Every parental instinct screamed at me to help my child. But I knew, with a certainty that ached, that Katie needed to face real consequences. "Katie needs to stay in jail," I told my ex-wife as gently as I could. "Maybe hitting rock bottom is what will finally push her to get help." She called me heartless and hung up. I sat alone in my house for an hour, staring at a wall, the guilt crushing my chest. Was I doing the right thing, or was I abandoning my daughter when she needed me most? Round noon, I drove to Ross and Juliet's house. Juliet took one look at my face and made me sit down. I told her about the bail and my ex-wife's call. She listened intently and then said something that changed my perspective. "Supporting Katie doesn't mean protecting her from consequences," she explained. "Real love sometimes means letting someone hit rock bottom so they'll finally seek help." I argued that every instinct tells a parent to rescue their child. Juliet nodded. "Yes, but rescuing Katie just enables her to hurt more people. Do you want to help Katie or help Katie's victims?" The question struck me with the force of a physical blow. I thought of Finn, Michael, and Sophie, their faces, their newfound peace. The guilt was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a grim resolve. I knew I had made the right choice, even though it was the most painful one. 3 weeks after Katie was sent back to jail, her new lawyer called Finn. She was accepting the plea deal. She would undergo anger management and a psychological evaluation, and supervised visitation would continue. In exchange, the domestic violence charges would be reduced. The lawyer said he had convinced Katie that a trial would likely mean worse outcomes, potentially her losing all parental rights. Finn called me right after, relieved we could avoid the trauma of a trial, but soberly aware that this was just the beginning of a long legal process. The plea hearing happened on a Wednesday morning. I sat in the courtroom and watched Katie stand to give her statement. She apologized to the court for her actions, saying she was sorry for causing problems, but she never once looked at Finn or offered him a genuine apology. She framed everything as a mutual conflict that got out of hand, stress from being a mother, misunderstandings that escalated. The judge listened with a blank expression. When she finished, he stated, "Completion of all court-ordered treatment is mandatory, not optional." His tone made it clear he saw right through her performance. Psychological evaluation results arrived 2 weeks later. I read the report at my kitchen table. Katie was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder with narcissistic traits. The psychologist detailed her pattern of perceiving abandonment everywhere, her intense manipulation of those around her, and her complete inability to accept responsibility. The report recommended intensive therapy and possibly medication, noting that without treatment, Katie would likely continue her pattern of destructive relationships. I sat there feeling a complex mix of grief and relief. Finally, I had an explanation for the chaos and drama I could never understand. All those years of wondering what I had done wrong as a parent, and now I knew it was a disorder that needed professional help. Over the next month, Finn and I settled into a new routine. Every Thursday evening, I watched Michael and Sophie so Finn could attend his support group for male domestic violence survivors. The first time the kids called me Grandpa naturally without any prompting, I almost cried. We were building real relationships based on truth, not on Katie's manufactured crises. Michael showed me his homework and asked for help with math. Sophie wanted me to play dolls with her. These evenings became the highlight of my week, a chance to be the grandfather I should have been from the start. Katie's supervised visitations continued every week. The supervisor's reports noted that Katie struggled to focus on the children's needs, instead spending visits trying to get Michael and Sophie to relay messages to Finn or asking them probing questions about their life with Dad. Michael started saying he didn't want to go. Sophie seemed confused about why Mommy couldn't come home. The supervisor documented all of it. 6 weeks after the confrontation at the house, we were back in family court for a mediator to decide on long-term custody arrangements. Katie's lawyer pushed for unsupervised visitation, arguing she had completed her anger management course and deserved a chance at shared custody. Finn's lawyer argued for continued supervision until Katie completed treatment and demonstrated genuine, lasting change in her behavior, not just the minimum requirements. I had to testify again, this time about Katie's ongoing manipulation attempts and her lack of genuine accountability. Katie stared at me from across the courtroom with pure, cold hatred in her eyes. The judge reviewed all the supervisor reports and the psychological evaluation. We sat in silence for 20 minutes while he read. Then he announced his ruling. Finn would retain sole custody. Supervised visitation would continue for a minimum of 6 months. Katie must complete her anger management and show 1 full year of stable mental health treatment before any custody modification would even be considered. Katie's face went completely blank as she processed the timeline. 1 full year, not a month or even 6 months. An entire year of proving she had changed before she could even ask for unsupervised visits. I watched her, wondering if she was finally understanding that her actions had lasting consequences she couldn't manipulate her way out of. Outside the courthouse, Finn pulled me aside. He asked if I would be willing to get listed as the emergency contact and backup guardian for Michael and Sophie in case anything ever happened to him. I agreed without a moment's hesitation. We drove to the family court office that same afternoon and filled out the paperwork together, me signing form after form while Finn made copies. The clerk processed it all efficiently and handed us the stamped documents. Finn shook my hand, his grip firm. "Thank you for trusting me enough to do this." "It should be me thanking you," I replied, "for trusting me after everything Katie put you through." Walking back to our cars, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I was finally being the father and grandfather I should have been all along, protecting the children my daughter should have protected herself. 2 weeks later, Katie started her court-ordered anger management classes. Her therapist called Finn, asking if he would participate in a joint session as part of her treatment plan. Finn looked stressed when he told me over dinner. He called his own therapist on speakerphone for advice. The therapist explained that joint sessions are only safe and productive when both people are ready to take responsibility, which Katie was not. She needed to work on her own issues first. Finn politely declined the invitation via text. Katie apparently erupted during her next therapy session, screaming that Finn's refusal proved he never cared about fixing their marriage. Her therapist documented the outburst, more evidence that Katie still saw herself as the victim. Around the same time, I began my own therapy with Juliet. Loving my daughter while accepting she was an abuser felt impossible some days. I would sit in her office and cry for the Katie I thought I knew, then feel guilty for grieving when Finn and the kids were the real victims. Juliet reminded me that both things could be true. I could hope Katie got help while also protecting the people she hurt. Enabling her for 2 years wasn't love. It was just making it easier for her to keep hurting people. Some days I managed this balance well, taking the kids to the park and feeling good about being there for them. Other days, a memory of Katie as a sweet 5-year-old girl would surface, and I'd have to pull my car over and just sit until the wave of grief passed. 3 months after the confrontation, Michael's school called Finn. Michael had gotten into a fight on the playground. Finn asked me to come with him to the meeting with the principal. He sat in the office while Michael waited outside. The teacher explained that Michael had punched another boy who was bullying a smaller first grader. When asked why he did it, Michael said, "I couldn't just stand there and let him hurt someone smaller. That's what my mom did to my dad, hurting someone who can't fight back. Nobody should hurt people they're supposed to love or people who are smaller than them." The teacher looked at us with deep understanding. Finn hugged Michael and told him he was proud of him for protecting others, but that they needed to work on using words before fists. Michael received detention for fighting, but the teacher made it clear she understood his motives. Katie completed her anger management course 6 weeks later and received a certificate. Her lawyer filed it with the court as evidence of her progress. However, the court also requested the instructor's private evaluation. That report told a different story. The instructor noted that Katie participated minimally, blamed Finn and others for her anger, and showed little real understanding of her behavior patterns. She had completed the hours and passed the tests, but had not internalized the lessons. The judge reviewed both documents and announced the custody arrangement would remain unchanged. Katie's face went blank with disbelief. She had expected the certificate to be a golden ticket. Sophie started preschool that fall. Her teacher called Finn after the first week because of a family drawing Sophie made. It showed Daddy, Grandpa, Uncle Ross, and Aunt Juliet all holding hands and smiling. Mommy was nowhere to be seen. Finn explained the situation to the teacher. Later, Sophie told her whole class during circle time that her mommy could only visit at a special building because she made bad choices and hurt people. The teacher said it was heartbreaking, but also healthy. Sophie was processing her reality without confusion or shame. Derek called me out of the blue one Saturday, asking to meet for coffee. We hadn't spoken since the day of the confrontation. He looked like he'd aged 5 years, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight tremor in his hands as he held his coffee cup. He told me he was in therapy twice a week, struggling with guilt over his role in Katie's abuse, even though he hadn't known the truth. I told him he was a victim too, I said. Katie manipulated us both with the same lies. We talked for an hour about how she built false realities, making us believe we were heroes when we were actually her instruments. Before we left, he asked me if I thought Katie would ever really change. I don't know, I told him honestly, but I'm not waiting around to find out. Katie's therapist submitted a progress report to the court 4 months into treatment. It stated Katie was beginning to acknowledge that her actions hurt people, which sounded positive on the surface. But the therapist also noted that Katie still struggled with taking full responsibility, often appending excuses about how Finn or stress or other factors had made her act that way. The therapist recommended she transition to a more intensive, structured program for personality disorders. Katie fought this recommendation fiercely, telling her lawyer she had done everything the court asked and deserved to move straight to unsupervised visitation. Her lawyer tried to explain that the court required the completion of all recommended treatment, not just the minimum. Katie reportedly threw a fit in his office, solidifying the pattern of seeing herself as the persecuted victim. 4 months after the confrontation, Finn mentioned during one of our weekly dinners that he had started dating. He met someone at his support group, a woman who understood what he'd been through without needing lengthy explanations. He was nervous about introducing someone new to the children, but he also sounded hopeful in a way I'd never heard before, as if he was starting to believe he deserved a normal, healthy life. Take it slow with the kids, I advised him, but it will be good for them to see what a kind relationship looks like. Katie found out about Finn's new relationship 2 weeks later and completely lost control during a supervised visit. The supervisor's report detailed how Katie spent the first 15 minutes crying to Michael and Sophie, saying Daddy had replaced her and didn't love their family anymore. She asked them if they'd met the new woman and if Daddy loved her more than Mommy. Sophie started crying because Katie was crying, and Michael shut down, refusing to answer. The supervisor had to end the visit 30 minutes early. The detailed report about Katie using the children for emotional support set back any progress she had made. Her lawyer warned her that such manipulation risked her losing visitation entirely. About 3 weeks after that incident, Michael's therapist called Finn with an update, which he shared with me. Michael was processing everything remarkably well, and the stable home life with his father and extended family was making a huge difference in his healing. Sophie, while too young for formal therapy, was more relaxed, laughed more, and had fewer nightmares. The therapist noted that both children seemed calmest and happiest during the weeks when visitation was less frequent. Finn was relieved but also saddened, knowing his children were better off with limited contact with their own mother. 6 months after the confrontation, we returned to court for a review of Katie's progress. The judge read through the stack of reports from supervisors and therapists, his face growing more serious with each page. He stated that while Katie had completed the required programs, every supervisor reported ongoing concerns about her lack of genuine understanding. Her therapist wrote that Katie still tried to manipulate sessions, showed no real insight into her behavior, and continued to blame everyone else. The judge looked directly at Katie and extended the supervised visitation for another 6 months, ordering her into the more intensive therapy program for personality disorders. Katie's face hardened, her jaw clenched, and her hands gripped the table. I saw the same rage in her eyes I'd witnessed just before she grabbed the knife. The judge added that any further manipulation or violations would result in the termination of all visitation rights. Katie just stared at him with cold, defiant hatred. 2 weeks after that hearing, Katie called and asked to meet me alone at a coffee shop. A part of me hoped she was finally ready for honesty. She looked tired and older than her 32 years. For an hour, she talked at me, spinning a web of conspiracy. How Finn had poisoned my mind, how the therapists were biased, how the videos were edited, how the court system was unfair. She was still the victim, and everyone else was the problem. I listened with a deep, settling sadness. My daughter might never be capable of the self-reflection needed for real change. When she finally stopped, expecting my support, I told her quietly, "I love you, but I can't agree with anything you've just said." She called me a traitor and walked out. Despite the pain of that meeting, I found profound joy in my new life with Finn and the grandchildren. We established a routine of Sunday dinners, and I became a fixture at soccer games and preschool performances. I was building the grandfather relationship I'd missed for years. Finn mentioned that the kids talked about me constantly during the week. Sophie drew another family picture, and this one had me standing right next to Daddy, with both kids between us, all of us smiling. I had to step away for a moment, my eyes too watery to see. Round that time, Ross called with wonderful news. He and Juliet were moving to a town only 20 minutes away. Juliet had been offered a better position, and Ross could work remotely. They wanted to be closer to support Finn, the kids, and me. Ross admitted they'd grown attached to Michael and Sophie and wanted to be present in their lives. The gratitude I felt was overwhelming. My family was choosing to support the victims, not enable the abuser. 8 months after the confrontation, Finn and the kids were thriving. The house I'd bought to save my daughter had instead saved my son-in-law and grandchildren, giving them a safe haven to build a real life. Michael was excelling in school. Sophie was happy and social, and Finn looked healthier and more at peace. Katie continued her supervised visits, but the children's enthusiasm had waned as they grew more secure. Michael began asking if he'd have to keep going when he was older, saying the visits made him uncomfortable. The supervisor's reports noted that Katie, sensing she was losing them, had increased her manipulation attempts, which only pushed the children further away. Looking back, I learned that love sometimes means accepting painful truths and choosing to protect the victims, even when it breaks your heart. I lost my daughter, the relationship we had, and the person I thought she was. But I gained a son and 2 grandchildren who needed me to see the truth and act on it. Katie might never change. The diagnosis suggested she might not be capable of the honest self-reflection that real change requires. Nights I still grieve the daughter I thought I had. I wonder what I missed or what I could have done differently. But most days I'm grateful I saw through her lies in time to help the people she hurt the most. I'm committed to being the grandfather and father figure they need for as long as I have left, to showing up for soccer games, preschool performances, Sunday dinners, and bedtime stories. That is what family should be, and I am profoundly grateful for this second chance.